Hello and welcome back to the Boropolis podcast. As usual, I am joined with Nathan, and in this week's episode, of course, we will be discussing the 1-1 draw with Burnley, whilst also looking ahead to a trip to Elland Road. And then, of course, wrapping up quite an intense period of the season, or intense kind of a run of fixtures, with, of course, the visit of the Wall. Nathan, how has your weekend been? How's your week been? I'm just happy to see that you've kind of not been blown away anywhere. I know you were making sort of long journeys when everyone was advised not to on Friday. So just the fact that you're in one piece is a positive, really.
Yeah, not so bad, Chris. Yeah, busy week with work and then had a long weekend because it was my birthday on Saturday. So pleased that the Boro didn't ruin it on Friday night, if I'm totally honest. But yeah, I was over the Pennines in the Lake District, travelling back on Saturday with Storm Dara causing mayhem and nearly putting a branch through my windscreen as well. So that was thrilling. But yeah, I'm not so bad. What about yourself?
Yeah, I'm not so bad. Just about surviving the winds, the rain. Do you know what? I was thinking back to sort of like just games of a Middlesbrough sort of last decade or so, and just thinking about like really bad games when it comes to weather conditions today, randomly, as you do. And do you know what popped into my head? And I'm sorry to remind anyone listening to this, and I promise I will stop waffling, but do you remember during Woodgate's tenure, I think we played Barnsley midweek, and literally it heavily rained that much that the ball just wasn't barely moving on the pitch. I think we scraped it 1-0 or something like that. Genuinely, probably one of the most disgusting evenings I've ever had at the Riverside Stadium.
I actually remember the goal as well. I think Fletcher had a shot, and the keeper had saved it, and then he tapped it in on the line.
Yeah, yeah. I was just, in terms of weather conditions, I mean, there's the obvious like Hull when it was snowing in like 2011 or something, was it perhaps? But yeah, I was just thinking about, well, I mean, weather conditions, we'll obviously get onto it and how it can sometimes affect things because, there's quite a talking point there. But yeah, Nathan, of course, what we are on this podcast to talk about is Friday night's game. Obviously, at the time of recording, we've had a little bit longer than we usually would. We're recording on Sunday evening, so we've had a little bit of a chance to dissect, calm down, kind of obviously watch back certain elements of the performance and certain chances that we had overall, and I know I'm sort of jumping the gun here, a valuable point, or did you kind of come away from Friday night thinking we probably could and should have had more out of that?
A bit of both, really. I think definitely a valuable point on the road, a ground where not many teams get anything, really. Don't concede many goals at all. Burnley conceded six all season ahead of Friday, and then, yeah, obviously, in typical footballing fashion, a player that's only scored one goal for Middlesbrough in 5 or 6 seasons pops up with the opener. Just funny how things work, but yeah, we did have chances in that second half as well. We'll get into a couple of them, but overall, I think we spoke last week on the pod about the next two games being Burnley and Leeds, and I think we both sort of just settled on a point in both would be good results for us. Looking at sort of what we've done against teams in and around that top six this season, obviously beat Sheffield United at the Riverside, played Sunderland and didn't necessarily click into gear before that point. Got beat in that game, albeit being very tight. And this one, again, tight game between two pretty good sides at championship level. And yeah, I think a point was probably a fair reflection on the game, if I'm totally honest.
Yeah, I'm pretty sort of similar in my view of Friday night events. I mean, when I say could and potentially should have had more than just a point, I think that's in reference to just sort of the big chances that we created. I think it would be absolutely fair to say we created the bigger chances in the second half. To be honest, in terms of, the odd sort of nervy moments where just, as a football fan, of a supporter of a club, sometimes I'm not even sure it is nervy, and people watching from home or with no kind of real sort of, connection to watching the game, whether they'd class it as nervy moments just when crosses are coming into the box in the final few minutes and things. But Burnley didn't really create anything of note at all, to be honest. And like I say, especially in the second half, we had some quite notable, really, really good openings. Obviously, the Latilaf one where he doesn't quite get his touch right when he's one-on-one. He's obviously trying to lift it over the Burnley keeper, lift it over Trafford, and he doesn't manage to do so. You think about the Bergsorg one where that's cut back. You think about the George Edmondson header. And then, of course, even in the first half, after we'd scored, Ben Doak is a whisker wide of putting his name right in the conversation for goal of the season. Sort of wriggles away from three Burnley bodies. But yeah, overall, I must say, I think a draw was probably a fair result. And I must say as well that when you consider that we've gone to an away team, firstly, but an away team that, as you said in the last podcast, have recently kind of turned a corner and hit a real good patch of form, which is, driven them up to the real sort of three-way battle, I guess it is at the moment, between obviously Burnley, Leeds and Sheffield United. They're right in and amongst that. So I think context-wise, of course, there was a game and we had some good chances, but overall, it's certainly one that you probably look at and think we've gone to a team that are in good form, don't concede a lot of goals, we haven't been beaten, and the performance in general, there's plenty of positives to take out of it. So, of course, you also look at it from a standpoint of if we go to Leeds and get beat on Tuesday night, it's almost like a bit deflating that you've only taken 1 point out of a possible however many. But it's an interesting one, really, because we both said, we'd both take a point in both games. But then, if you win one of those games, points-wise, you come out better from it. But in terms of not being beaten by a team in that position in the league, it's almost like a strange situation where it's given me more confidence, and I think it's a real positive that we've managed to go there and get a point and probably create the better chances, but also it's still only a point and we've got Leeds to play. It's a weird one, but yeah, overall, I'd say I was pretty pleased to go to Turf Moor and not concede a last-minute equaliser, to be honest. That Michael Keane game still just gives me horrific PTSD, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a good point on the board for us, and I thought that our goal was worked really well as well. Working it back into midfield, Barlas is sort of is angling towards the right hand side to continue playing on a triangle with Dork and Hayden Hackney, but instead then shimmies back inside, and Anthony Dijksteel is in a position where I don't think he's really ever found himself before for us. And do you want to know what? I was really impressed with, first of all, the pass, but second of all, his touches. The first one to trap it, next one sets him away from the Burnley defender. And little nudge in the back. I don't think he's getting a penalty for it either. But the decision to chip the ball over Trafford, great finish. It's not a finish from a right back that's only scored one Middlesbrough goal in his career so far. So yeah, a fine finish for Anthony Dijksteel. And on the night as well, he was a standout, won Sky Man of the match, and yeah, completely deserved it. There was a moment in that second half, I think it was Jaden Anthony was trying to sort of weave him, and Dijksteel just stood his ground, bodied him out the way, and seen it out for a goal kick, and even gave the crowd a little bit of a fist bump and a roar as he won that goal kick as well. So yeah, really, really pleased for Anthony Dijksteel. Spoke about him a lot towards the back end of last season and about the squad in its current predicament as it was. And I'll hold my hands up completely. I thought Anthony Dijksteel wouldn't be a Middlesbrough player this season.
I think in all fairness, Nathan, I think 99.9% of the Middlesbrough fan base thought that Anthony Dijksteel's time in Teesside was completely over going into the summer. It seemed, with the contract situation as well, it seemed the most obvious piece of business that we were going to do. But obviously, as you say, given circumstances and because of Tommy Smith's sort of delay in return, arguably, and I don't want to make a huge kind of over the top statement here, but in terms of turnarounds and kind of surprise packages of the season, I think Anthony Dijksteel's right up there. Every time that he's come into the team, and I know it was an error leading to Hull's goal last week, but every time he's come into this team this season, I've been really, really impressed with him.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And Carrick said after the game on Friday night that this is the best form that Anthony Dijksteel's had since Carrick's been at the club, and I'd completely agree with that, 100%. Defensively solid, offering something going forward in partnership with Dork on that right hand side. Yeah, really, really positive signs from Anthony Dijksteel, and it allows you to be able to rotate with Ayling and have capable replacements in that position, which is very, very nice in a time of the season where games are coming thick and fast. It's another 3 game week again. Yeah, really, really pleasing. And Barlasser as well. I thought Barlasser was again pretty good
Out,
on Friday night.
yeah. I mean, we've just briefly kind of had a little bit of a talk before really sort of getting the recording started. But in fairness, in terms of the midfield, out of the two in Middlesbrough's kind of two in midfield, stating the obvious there, he was the better of the two. It wasn't Hayden Hackney's best night in a Middlesbrough shirt. I don't think there's really any sort of question marks about Hayden Hackney. It just wasn't his best game. But I thought Dan Barlasser again was good. Just I think we're now starting, and I don't want to go too soon. I think we're now starting to see the real Dan Barlasser. He looks just more comfortable in terms of just little things. The amount of times that he would be dispossessed when he had a large spell in the team last season through kind of, well, no other reason other than there was no one else to play in midfield. But the amount of times he'd be dispossessed or he'd play a pass that you just think it's not on. And I honestly think, and I don't know if you read the interview as well, he talked a few weeks back now in an interview, and he said since he's had children, his whole sort of mindset has changed. And look, I don't think that kind of having children is the definitive way to play yourself back into form, but he talked about how his mindset has kind of changed, and perhaps given when he arrived and given that he didn't really play an awful lot of games when he first arrived in that January of course, I was about to call it the Coventry season there, but that's kind of what it's. I'll call it the Tuber and Giles season. But yeah, he didn't play an awful lot of football last season. Of course, when it was just so, I mean, just us as a team were just horribly sort of inconsistent. The squad, players available, it was the exact same. And I think Barlasser, and me and you probably part of that potentially. He become, I don't want to say a scapegoat, but I don't think it was an undeserved kind of, some of the comments that were made were undeserved regarding Dan Barlasser. And sometimes, I know we've spoken about it quite a couple of times over the last few weeks, but just in terms of players as humans, having that little bit of confidence. And, looking at it from the other way, last season, when we were really inconsistent, having occasional sort of really bad runs of form, it almost looked like sometimes he'd pick the ball up and overthink things. Now I feel like he's just playing his natural game. And because of that, we are just seeing a better version of Dan Barlaser. And actually, like we said last week, okay, partly it might be down to Johnny Howson's fitness and his age. And, he is getting to an age where he can't play 2 or 3 games a week. But I think Dan Barlaser's selection at the moment is nothing to do with kind of just stepping in for Howson. He's rightfully ahead of him in the pecking order as things stands.
Yeah, I'd agree. Since coming in that Oxford game, I think that really he hasn't necessarily put a foot wrong. Okay, in the Blackburn game, he wasn't at his best, but neither were we as a team really on that night. But in all the other games, really, I think he's been pretty good. Kept the ball really well. I think that Friday night was a little bit more of one where I felt would have been more of a test with Burnley actually looking to press us. Teams like Oxford and Hull, who we played and comfortably dispatched, weren't necessarily going to gung ho press Barlasser, whereas Blackburn, when we played them in a couple of weeks ago, were very quick to press on Howson and Barlasser as the ball was dropped into them, either from Bryn or from the defenders in that game. They were very quick to be on their toes to try and nick the ball off them and spring. I thought that that would have been similar for Burnley, and if I'm totally honest, Barlasser did pretty well in the game. If I'm totally honest as well, Burnley, apart from going 1-0 down in the game, didn't come out really. They got back level, and we didn't see a whole lot of them from the moment they got back level. Yeah, they had to chase, having gone 1-0 down. Obviously, we fell back into our shape a little bit in that moment. They pressed on, got the equaliser, and from then on, we had a lot of the control in the game and a lot of the territory as well going forward, trying to get that winner. They may have had 1 or 2 chances in that second half. The ones that stick out are Hannibal going alone when maybe he should have passed. Dale Fry put a good block in, and also the one where they put a cross in and Roberts is unmarked in the 6 yard box, which is absolutely criminal, by the way. And yeah, he really should do better than he did. But yeah, Chris, we'll get on to discussing the equaliser. So Connor Roberts gets the ball, plays it into a Burnley player who then knocks it on. And there was some question marks about our midfield positioning in this instance of how they just sort of vacated position. I think that Barlasser gets dragged away by Brownhill in his run, which look, that can happen. Hackney, maybe a little question mark as to why he's not in that sort of role. But then it comes to the strike. Roberts is stood 25 yards out from goal, swings his left foot at it, and if I'm totally honest, I think he's going one for the other corner, and the wind has took it right in the other one, or in the middle of the goal, over Dieng's head. And I think that my opinions changed on this, having watched it more and more. Initially, I was in the camp of goalkeeper just he has to do better. Why is he so far off his line for a
Mm-hmm.
start? And how has he been lobbed from that position? And then I actually watched Match of the Day last night, and I don't know if you've seen it. Andre Onana for Gibbs White's goal. He's right on his line, and Shay Given was talking about it, that it actually makes the goal look bigger for a striker or an attacker who's going to have a shot. So Dieng obviously has come towards the 6 yard box to make it look like the goal's smaller and have the ability to sort of not have to dive as far to get that ball if it is going in the top corner that one I think he anticipates, and me having watched it further back, I think he's going for the corner where the Boro fans are, Dieng's top right, and it's massively unfortunate that he's that Roberts has shanked it and it's gone it's gone
That
over his head and into the back of the net.
yeah, that is exactly as it is. What you've just said there. I'm not being funny, and Connor Roberts has developed this knack of scoring against Middlesbrough now, which is just strange because we always talk about those strikers where you think, oh, they always score, or just ex players in general. Never did I think when Connor Roberts on loan from, was it
Swansea.
Swansea? Yeah,
Swansea.
Swansea, making a grand total of about 2 appearances under Gary Monk, would then from that point onwards just kind of decide that he was going to be basically a huge pain in the backside. The only thing I remember Connor Roberts for is that Ramsden's currency challenge, which was, to be fair, really funny with Dale Fry. But yeah, I mean, obviously what we haven't quite touched on, and I know we did last week a little bit, but I mean, was it the right call for Solbrin to come out of the team? Should he have continued? Or, I mean, I think we kind of pretty much decided last week. But, as it got closer to the game, did your opinion change at all? Or were you happy to see Senny back in between the sticks?
I wouldn't necessarily say I was happy. I was just content.
Yeah,
I'm all right with our goalkeepers. I think that all three of them are perfectly good goalkeepers for the level, and I think it is clear Senny Dieng's number one. Solbrin, I think, will be eventually. Give it a couple of years. I think that it was the right step in his development for him to become the number two at Boro now. But I think, yeah, right call for Senny to come back in. I think it's just one of those freak goals that can just
yeah.
happen in the circumstances of the weather. And I don't know if you've seen as well, Connor Roberts on his Instagram had said something along the lines of "Thanks, Storm Dara."
Well, I mean, there you go then. Yeah, I think, to be honest, I'm always, unless it's an absolute howler where, we're talking sort of Joe Lumley levels of goalkeeping howlers, I'm always wary of criticise goalkeepers just because, to be honest, and I see a lot of it, and sometimes it makes me feel physically sick, to be honest. The whole like goalkeepers union, and basically that no goalkeeper can ever make a mistake because there's some tiny little element of the goal which no one else would understand, but because we're all goalkeeper buddies, we're allowed to say, no, you don't understand, but we know why he's conceded that. If I'm honest, of course, the conditions and the storm have played a massive part in this goal, but it's a right back on his weak foot from about 30 yards out. It's very fluky, I must say, but there's still a part of me which thinks, should he be that far off his line?
When I've seen it go in, that was my sort of viewpoint on it as well. It was how the hell have you been beaten from there by,
Yeah,
first of all, Connor Roberts on his left foot? Like, how have you even been beat from there? Like, there's just no way that he scored that purposefully. Okay, he's had a shot and like with the intention of hitting the target, but there's no way he struck it well enough to be able to beat you from there in that manner. And
yeah.
I think just the way that it's gone in, you can see it's shanked up in the air. Like it's not
It's not a
on a not
true trajectory of a football, is
no
it?
on a normal day, it probably lands in his gloves.
Yeah, possibly. I think, to be honest, and it's a really sort of, especially with goalkeepers, probably the worst part about it is straight away I thought, would Solbrin have saved that? And honestly, it's completely hypothetical. It would be almost pointless for me to say, yeah, I think he would have, or he might not have been that far off his line. What is interesting though, and I have seen recently, and even prior to his illness and obviously his spell out of the team, there was a little bit, and a very small one at that, but there was conversation around Seny Dieng, and although he's not necessarily kind of chucking them in his own net, we're not seeing Joe Lumley levels of like goalkeeper errors, but in terms of shot stopping in general, Seny Dieng's performance in terms of shots faced and goals conceded is actually down there with one of the worst goalkeepers in the division. And it does it does make you think a little bit that I'm sure for Solbrin's stint in goal for those 3 or 4 games, I don't think we faced substantially less shots. I mean, is there an argument there that he's a better shot stopper? I know obviously goalkeeping is a wider sort of role than that now. Part of the reason why I put in the fan panel this week for the Gazette about Seny Dieng coming back into the team was just his understanding in general of the way we play, his distribution, that kind of aspect of his game. But it comes back to the sort of old cliche of goalkeepers are there to stop goals. And Seny Dieng, in terms of his performance this season, I don't think he's necessarily. There's been no obvious. I know we always talk about it, but like just in terms of watching the games, there hasn't been that many Seny Dieng errors where I've thought that's an absolute howler. It's just been shots where probably a better goalkeeper does save them, but they haven't been horrendous by his standards. And I don't know. I think it is a strange one because it's not like I'm saying I want to change goalkeepers or Seny Dieng should come out of the team. But I think I am realizing that hypothetically, if we were to be promoted, that would be a position that I think would be right at the top of the shopping list.
Yeah, I think if I'm totally honest, that's most teams that get promoted, isn't it? And they all land on that keeper
Yeah,
who's at
true.
Ipswich currently, who's an absolute joke of a goalkeeper,
Yeah,
Murich.
yeah, he is. He is really bad.
Yeah, but I think it it is an interesting question to ask when you look at the goals that we have conceded this season, or at least some of them. You look at the Norwich one, the cross that goes in at the near post, and then you look at the one yesterday, or sorry, on Friday, and you think, is it just horrifically unlucky to concede these goals, or is it perhaps something more than that? Now I'll leave that question open to the floor, but that is two now that I think that we've sort of come on here and put it down as flukes, really. But that's two, and we're at Christmas now, so
Yeah, yeah.
we'll have to wait and see how things go for the rest of the season. But we can't be that unlucky going forward.
I certainly think in terms of just as a whole, in terms of the winners and losers of Solbrin coming into the team and Seny Dieng coming back into the team, I think now more so than ever, Solbrin is as close, undoubtedly, as he's ever been to potentially overtaking Dieng. I don't think between now and the end of the season, right now, sitting here, if Seny Dieng continues the form that we've seen him in this season, barring probably the QPR game where he had an amazing game that night, it wouldn't shock me at all if we end this season with Solbrin as our number one.
Possibly, yeah, it is definitely possible. I think that at the moment, especially with the fan base as well, and this is how sometimes how football works. with the fan base, Solberin's stock is probably at its highest that it's ever been.
Yeah,
In terms of fans putting his name forward as, well, should he be number one? We've seen him play for three
exactly.
for
That
three
that's the
games.
that's the important thing. We've seen him now up until the point of course, we've seen him in the cup earlier on this season, but we've seen him now in proper championship football matches. So we now know exactly the trade-off of Dieng and his distribution or Solbrin. And I don't think, to be honest, he's bad at distributing the ball. I think Dieng's probably a little bit better. But as I say, you now know the trade-off. And like you say, we've seen him. We know what we're going to get if Solbrin was to come into the team.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely an interesting question. And it'll be interesting to see how the next sort of couple of weeks goes well. If there will be any changes in that. I mean, totally touch wood, we don't see any goalkeeping mishaps over the next couple of weeks because we definitely want the best for the actual team and the league position. And
Of course.
totally, if I'm totally honest, it doesn't matter who's in goal for me. Like they both are very capable championship goalkeepers, and I don't think there's a whole lot in it really.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of it comes down to confidence and things like that as well. So yeah, it's an interesting question mark, but in the end, a good point away from home at Turf Moor. The next one in a 3 game week is arguably the biggest one and arguably the biggest test that we're going to face all season, and that
Yeah.
is a trip to Ellen Road. Obviously, we've had one already this season in the cup, and on that night we'd seen a little bit of a changed up Boro team. Solbrin was in goal that night for his Boro debut and kept a clean sheet at Ellen Road. The first win there and in a very, very long time. I think it was the
It's
first win
it's
there
got it's got to be.
2011, I think.
Yeah, I was going to say it's got to be more than a decade.
I think on the last time we beat them at Ellen Road in the league,
Marvin Emnes.
Marvin Emnes,
Yeah.
Tony Mowbray as manager. Yeah, look, Ellen Road is fortress in the championship. They do not concede many goals there. They do not drop many points there at all. It's quite funny to see the sort of discourse around Leeds so far this season. Obviously, you looked at them last season and the plethora of options that they had in the attacking four was just silly for the level. I mean, Rutter went for 40 million quid. Somerville went for 30 million quid. Dan James is still there now. Nonto's still there now. Aronson's come back from his loan. He's there on the bench on Saturday in their win over Derby. I gave you a message. Ethan Ampadu's back from injury. He was on the bench. Nonto, Ramazani, Bamford, and Matteo Joseph all started Saturday on the bench. And I think that there is a massive case that those 5 players that I named there walk into pretty much every team in the championship.
Maybe not Bamford.
Maybe not Bamford anymore, but he doesn't
He,
mind.
he, he gets he gets. I'm not going to lie. He doesn't get. I mean, we're incredibly fortunate in that
We are
department, but to be fair, Patrick Bamford still probably gets in a lot of championship teams.
100%, 100%. Yeah, they've got an absolute load.
Embarrassment of
Yeah,
riches.
embarrassment of riches is the way to put it for the level. Daniel Fark has done it before, but as mentioned, the discourse around their team at the minute is they're getting business done, they're winning games, but not necessarily all too convincing in the manner that they are doing it.
Yeah, I see a lot of this on social media, and obviously, Leeds fans in general are, I think, quite guilty sometimes of living in the past. And obviously, Leeds fans of a certain age, it's quite understandable. They've seen their club at the heights of European football, competing for the Premier League at times. And because of that, and even despite all of the mayhem of the Chilino era and however many managers that they had, and some of the crap that they've had over the years on the pitch as well, they for the most part do still have a belief that they should be in the Premier League. They are Leeds United. They are without a doubt really the biggest club in the EFL. I think it would be fair to say. And even though they are, as you say, getting their business done, the amount of times I see posts on social media about could it be time to change? Is Farker on shaky ground? And then you're like, have you not looked at the league table in the last few weeks? You know, you're right in and amongst it. And I know you've got a good squad, but yeah, it's a weird discourse because he's been there and done it. I think there is probably an argument there last season where squad-wise, okay, Ipswich were an outlier, but if you look at some of the players and what those players will go on to achieve, and also what everyone expected them to achieve last season, they've undoubtedly underachieved with an absolute abundance of quality. They've still got an abundance of quality, and it's probably, I guess, a little bit of they've been scarred from the past where they haven't quite pulled away yet. And they're going to be sort of battling at the moment what looks like with Sheffield United, Burnley, possibly us if we really get our act together. And of course, Sunderland as well, who are just kind of ticking along after a little bump in the road the last few weeks. And in all honesty, I think most people had them down to win this league, not at a counter, but as the obvious favourite. And as you say, it's a strange one because we have a terrible record there. Leeds have a great record at home against most teams. But yet, you almost feel if you can go there and get the first goal, the crowd will just turn straight away. And I mean, we did manage to do that last season, but that just turned into the most frantic game of basketball I think anyone's ever seen. And of course, I mean, we'll get onto it in a little bit, and we've touched on Dijksteel for all of the right reasons. But prior to that cup game, Anthony Dijksteel in Leeds is not a good combination whatsoever.
No, it's not. I've seen some Anthony Dijksteel horror shows there, but I've also seen him put in a man of the match display there this season. So
Very true.
it's a very strange one. But despite my opinions on this, being that there won't be a lot in there, having played Leeds last season twice and it being goal fests
Yeah,
in both games, 3-2 defeat at their place, 3-4 defeat at the Riverside in April. Yeah, I can't be doing, if I'm totally honest, for my heart, I can't be doing with a basketball match because because going 1-0 up there last season and then conceding two in the space of about a minute where we're attacking and you just see them break. And it was like Somerville, James, Nonto, Rutter, all running forward. And I'm thinking,
oh
shit, we're in
dear.
trouble.
Yeah.
We are in trouble. Now,
And then the smallest player on the pitch, Dan James, scores a header. That
and,
was
so, and Somerville did as
yeah,
well.
yeah, that was very Borough of that was very on trend for the Borough of last season, wasn't it? One man, I mean, you just referenced the games last season, which does, by all accounts, quite like playing against Leeds, Emmanuel Latilaf. For me, I would be absolutely amazed if he doesn't come back into the team for Tuesday night. I think we may also see Riley McGree come in. I'm not as certain on that one because Bergsorg was quiet and obviously missed that chance at Burnley. But if it is going to be counter-attacky and a little bit of a basketball match, and I don't think Carrick will go in with any intention of it being like that, but on the basis of what we saw last season, there's every possibility that it might be. I think the back line will remain the same. The midfield will. I think the only two positions which are a debatable one is the striker, and as I say, as much as we talked about it last week in the dilemma regarding strikers, I think Latilaf will come back into the team, and I think possibly Riley McGree might as well.
I think that those are interesting points. I think Latilath, I agree on. I was surprised that he didn't come back in on Friday night. If I'm totally honest, we spoke about it last week, and I was adamant that Latilath would come back in despite Conway's 2 goals against Hull. And McGree, interesting point. Again, I think that Bergzorg, the game could be more suited to him with it being possibly basketball-y, and his pace can help him out. But also looking ahead to Millwall on Saturday as well, I think that could be a game more for McGree where Millwall will probably sit in a little bit more. So that's just my opinion. I don't know what he'll do. I mean, it'd amaze me if Riley McGree could stomach 2 games in a week, if I'm totally honest. So we'll see. We'll wait and see on that
It
front.
it hurts, but it's true.
Yeah, it is. But look, Leeds, interesting one. Expecting a very exciting game. I will be in attendance. It will be freezing. And then Saturday, the visit of Moo.
Yeah, I mean, Millwall are one of those clubs, and I almost respect them for it, where for however many years we've done this podcast for now, what we're about to discuss and what to expect from what you're going to get from Millwall could probably be copy and pasted each year. Look, they aren't quite sort of 4-4-2 Bradshaw off Steve Morrison levels of Millwall, but you know what they're going to come to the Riverside and do, don't you?
They were what they were for a period. What more off Coburn, which is hilarious.
which is just the modern day version of that, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, they're a funny side. They tried to sort of revert away from type, I suppose, which is Neil Harris, Gary Rowett, just proper Millwall, like
Yeah.
wingers, 4 at the back, 2 like just bruisers in midfield that are going to run around and try and kick you. Can't really pass a ball, can't really do much else, and 2 sausages up front. But they try to revert away from that with Joe Edwards last season. Do you want to know what? In the game that we played them in January, they actually battered us for the first half as well.
Yeah, I do remember that they were playing some all right stuff. And to be fair, even in the game that they won first game of last season as well, I remember us having a conversation about how well prepared that they looked to go out and potentially try and gate crash the playoffs compared to where we were. And I mean, ultimately it was, I mean, they survived quite comfortably, but for a large part of that season, I think there was genuine fear that they may actually go down. And again, to be honest, with Millwall, we spoke about the Leeds discourse. It's similar, or at least from what kind of X throws up at me, it seems to be similar in the fact that Neil Harris isn't actually all that popular at the moment with Millwall fans. And I don't know if that is down to the style of football. I don't know if, again, they expect to be higher up the division. But to be honest, they've had a, a pretty strong kind of run of games, or at least had been in terms of form and results wise, just off the back of the last couple of weeks there. And they're sort of in and around where you would just anticipate them to be. I don't know kind of where they expect to be or what their aspirations for the season would be. But yeah, I mean, that might just be a really kind of lazy way of looking at things. But I don't really see them anywhere else, possibly sticking a few wins together and trying to get in the top 6. But other than that, they're kind of where I would expect them to be.
Yeah, yeah. I think I know it's really, really sort of bad of me here, but I'd just shoehorn them in the bracket with Preston and Bristol City as they are championship, and
Yeah.
that is just them summed up really. But in fairness, they got beat on Saturday against Frank Lampard's Coventry City. But before then, their last defeat was the 1st of October. Like they were on a really, really good run. Now, the only sort of point that I would make, I'm not necessarily clued up on Millwall all too much, but I have seen that discourse that you were just referring to about Harris. We spoke a couple of weeks ago that they won four on the spin, all 1-0. And those wins were sandwiched between two draws away at West Brom and at home to Derby. And since beating Leeds in, well, at the start of November, they drew away at Stoke, drew to Sunderland, obviously late in the game,
Yeah.
drew at Oxford
Yeah.
last week. So maybe that's just Millwall sneaking it in tight games, won those four by very fine margins. I know in one of those games they scored very, very late at Swansea when they'd been absolutely battered from pillar to post. But look, the end of the day, and it'll be Neil Harris's point as well, it's a results business, and he's picking up results with a team that they've got one of the smallest budgets in the league, to be fair to them, and they have punched well above their weight in terms of league position for a lot of seasons. Okay, last season they struggled a bit, trying to change styles, but Harris kept them up. And yeah, they're going to be a tough nut to crack next week. 100% proper Millwall side that are just horrible, nasty, tough to beat, gonna sit in, and if they can nick one, that'll do them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Exactly as we've discussed Millwall the previous 4 years or 3 years or however long it's been doing this podcast. So yeah, I don't expect anything else. And obviously, look, we don't want to put a glass eye to sleep and talk about Boro's troubles with playing against a low block again. We all know the challenges, but as we said last week, if Boro want to be in and amongst that top echelon of the division, you've got to find a way. And hopefully we will do that off the back of a positive performance at Ellen Road again. So, yes, Nathan, all I'm going to say is just it's a little bit of a different end to the podcast this week. All I'm going to say is wear plenty of layers on Tuesday night, because I think you might still be defrosting by the time that we go to record on Sunday.
100%, yeah. It'll be a minging cold one at Ellen Road. Hopefully the Borough warm me up.
I'm leaving it at that, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you ever so much for watching and listening again. If you have watched on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. If you are listening on your audio platforms, you can also subscribe and leave a rating or a review. For those of you which are actually listening on audio platforms, I don't know if the mic will have picked it up, but Nathan has just recreated the warm your hands up round the ball celebration. And as a bit of bonus content, Nathan did recreate that celebration on a night out. So if we beat Leeds, I will post the video on the Boropolis Twitter account. You've got that to look forward to if we win. Thanks ever so much for watching and listening again. That has been another episode of the Boropolis podcast.